The first rule of the silence protocol was simple: no emotional leakage, no uncontrolled reactions, no verbal escalation between species. Dr. Elias Rowan helped write that rule after the Europa incident, when one mistranslated tone had nearly started an interstellar war. That was why the room was muted now. No sound passed between the human observation deck and the diplomatic chamber beyond the transparent barrier. No sound except the soft internal hum of the station felt more than heard. Elias stood with his hands clasped behind his back, staring through the glass at the being who had changed his life in ways he still did not understand. She stood perfectly still on the other side, 9 tails resting like pale flames against the polished floor, ears upright, eyes focused forward. Laras of the Varan looked almost serene. Almost. Her species was known among humans as Fuxfuck, though that name did not do them justice. They were taller than humans, more slender, with long limbs adapted for low-gravity worlds. Their fur shifted calque with emotional states, a trait that had once been considered decorative until scientists realized it was biological truth made visible. At this moment, Larasa's fur shimmered between pearl white and faint silver, a sign of internal restraint. Elias touched the control panel on his wrist and confirmed the mute field remained active. No sound, no pheromonal exchange, no subsonic emotional blade. Only visuals. Only truth without tone. He had agreed to this meeting reluctantly. After the medical report, after the sealed council hearing, after the words he still heard echoing in his mind every time he closed his eyes. Interstellar's gestation confirmed. Hybrid viability stable. Pregnancy progressing normally. None of it should have been possible. Human and Varan biology were fundamentally incompatible by every model known to science. Different genetic architectures, different cellular replication logic, different reproductive triggers. And yet here they were. Laras lifted her hand slowly and placed it against the glass, claws retracted in a gesture of trust. Her eyes softened, and Elias felt something twist painfully in his chest. He mirrored the gesture, pressing his palm to the barrier, knowing she could not feel the warmth, but hoping she understood the intent. This was not how their story had begun. Months earlier, Elias had first met Laras during the negotiation mission on Capri Station. She had been the cultural liaison for the Varan delegation, chosen for her unusually high tolerance for human unpredictability. He had been the lead Xanalinguist, responsible for Unshang no phrase carried unintended dominance markers. They had spoken for hours, sometimes days, always under partial mute fields, always careful, always professional. Except when they were not. It started with laughter, silent at first, shared through expressions and gestures. Then curiosity, then trust. The mute protocols relaxed during joint research sessions, carefully supervised, medically monitored. Friendship formed where caution had once ruled. Elias remembered the moment everything changed. A late shift in the bioresonance lab, lights dimmed to preserve circadian stability, Laras seated across from him with her tails wrapped neatly around her legs. She had tilted her head and asked, through the translator field, why humans stared at stars knowing they could never reach most of them. He had answered honestly, because wonder does not require ownership. Her fur had bloomed gold that night, a calque associated with profound emotional alignment among the Varan. Neither of them had spoken after that, but neither had left. Now, months later, the consequences stood quietly between them. A medical drone drifted past behind Laras, projecting a faint holographic display visible even through the glass. Elias did not need to read the data to know what it showed. A developing life, neither fully human nor fully Varan, adapting in ways that rewrote established science with every cellular division. Laros lowered her hand and stepped back, placing both palms over her abdomen. Her ears angled slightly back, a sign of vulnerability she would never display before her own people. Her fur shifted again, this time to a soft dawn blue, the Varun Kulka of revelation. Elias swallowed. He wanted to speak, to apologize, to promise, to ask impossible questions. But the room remained muted by design. Because sound carried instinct, and instinct could ignite fear. Outside the chamber, observers from both species watched through separate feeds, their reactions carefully filtered. To them, this was a diplomatic anomaly, a biological puzzle, a potential crisis. To Elias, it was a moment suspended between past and future. He activated the visual communication pad and typed slowly, choosing words that could not be misunderstood. I am here. I am not leaving. We will face this together. The text appeared on Larissa's side of the glass, translated into flowing Varun glyphs. She read it, her eyes widening slightly, tails lifting a fraction off the floor. Then she smiled, small and careful and unbearably real. She typed back, her claws tapping lightly on the surface. Then the silence was not empty anymore. It was full of meaning. Beyond the chamber, alarms remained quiet, treaties intact, protocols unbroken. But something irreversible had already begun. The silence protocol had been designed to prevent chaos. Instead, it had become the cradle of something new. The council chamber, lights dimmed in gradual phases, signaling the transition from observation to deliberation. Elias remained inside the muted room, even after the observers withdrew their feeds. Protocol allowed it, but tradition discouraged prolonged isolation with an emotional variable. Laros was that variable now, and so was he. She shifted her weight slightly, tails moving with controlled precision as she turned away from the glass. When she faced him again, her posture was different, less formal, more personal. The Fuxlux symmetry of her features softened, ears angling outward in a gesture that among the Varun meant shared burden. Elias activated the visual pad again, his fingers hesitating before typing. The silence pressed on him, however now that no one else was watching. Do you feel pain? He wrote. Laros read the words slowly, then shook her head. She typed in response. Not pain, change. My body is adapting faster than expected. The child is communicating biochemically. Elias exhaled through his nose, a habit he had not realized he still had. Communication already, he typed. That early. Her ears twitched upward. Yes. The Varun gestational bond forms early, but this is different. The human half is accelerating neural patterning. That sentence alone would append decades of xenobiology. Elias almost smiled, almost laughed, but caught himself. This was not a lab result. This was their reality. He remembered the night Lyris had collapsed during a routine scan. The sudden alarms, the rush of medical drones, the panic he had been forced to suppress as security escorted him out. At the time, they had assumed stress. Only later had the truth emerged. Lyris stepped closer to the glass again and raised one hand. This time she did not place it against the barrier. Instead, she traced a slow circle in the air, an old Varan symbol. Elias recognized it from cultural briefings. Continuity. A future extending from the present. He swallowed and typed again. They will try to separate us. The council will argue containment, study, relocation. Lyris nodded once, her expression calm but resolute. They fear what they cannot classify. So do humans. That strung because it was true. Elias had built his career on classification, on boundaries, on rules that kept species from misunderstanding one another. Now those same rules felt like walls closing in. He leaned closer to the glass, lowering his voice even though it did not matter. "We did not break the protocol intentionally," he typed. "There was consent, monitoring, safeguards." Her reply came quickly. "I know. This is not a failure. It is an emergence." The word lingered in his mind. Emergence. A system producing something greater than the sum of its parts. Outside the chamber, discussions were already escalating. Projections of risk, simulations of hybrid integration, ethical debates framed in sterile language. None of them could see the way Lyris's hand trembled slightly when she rested it against her abdomen. None of them could feel the weight of responsibility settling into Elia's chest. A soft pulse of light passed through the chamber as the medical field updated. Lyris closed her eyes briefly, ears flattening. Elia straightened instantly. "Are you all right?" he typed, faster than before. She opened her eyes and nodded, a small smile returning. "The child responded to your proximity. Your neural signature is familiar." That sentence broke something open inside him. Familiar. Before birth, before voice, before touch. He pressed his palm against the glass again, closer to where she stood. "If they try to take the child," he typed. "I will not agree." Lyris's fur flared briefly, a ripple of deep violet racing along her tails. That was a Varin color of protection, rare and powerful. Then it faded back to silver. "Nor will I." For a moment, neither of them typed. The silence shifted from tension to understanding. Lyris moved slowly, deliberately, and sat on the floor of the chamber, tails curling around her legs. She gestured for him to do the same. Elias hesitated only a second before lowering himself to the polished surface on his side of the glass, mirroring her posture. They sat there facing one another, divided by transparent alloy and centuries of difference, yet bound by something older than either species had language for. "Do you regret it?" Elias typed at last, the question heavy, unavoidable. Lyris studied him for a long moment. Then she placed both hands over her abdomen again and answered, "No, I fear the future, but I do not regret its existence." Elias closed his eyes briefly, letting the truth of that settle. Neither did he. A signal light flashed amber at the edge of the chamber. 5 minutes until council summons. Time was narrowing. Lyris stood gracefully and inclined her head, a formal gesture layered with personal meaning. "Whatever they decide," she typed. "Remember this moment. This silence chose us." Elias stood as well, heart pounding. He typed his final words before the field disengaged. "We will not be muted forever." Her smile this time was brighter, her fur warming toward gold once more. And for the first time since the discovery, Elias felt something beyond fear. Hope. The council chamber was older than the station itself, a relic carried forward through successive expansions, its architecture designed to intimidate by scale alone. Elias stood at its center platform, hands folded, shoulders squared, while holographic representatives of 12 species shimmered into place around the circular hall. Across from him, separated by a translucent containment field rather than glass, stood Lyris. She was not restrained, but the implication of control was unmistakable. The mute field remained active. Only visuals, only sanctioned text, only gestures approved by interspecies law. Elias felt the familiar frustration rise. Words were his craft, his shield, his weapon. And now he was stripped of them. A towering avian delegate from the Kesh array tilted its crested head, optical nodes focusing on Lyris's abdomen. Data glyphs scrolled rapidly beside it. "The anomaly is verified," the delegate signaled through council text. Probability curves suggest long-term instability. Another representative, this one human, projected a calmer presence. We must not frame this as a threat by default. History shows fear escalates faster than understanding. Elias resisted the urge to glance at the human delegate. He knew that tone. Careful words hiding political survival instincts. Lyris remained still, ears forward, tails lowered respectfully. Her fur held a steady silver, control layered atop unease. A new text prompt appeared before Elias, requesting his testimony. He inhaled slowly and began to type. This pregnancy was not the result of negligence. All interaction occurred within monitored parameters. Consent was mutual. Safeguards were followed. What we are witnessing is not a breach, but a discovery. As his words translated across the chamber, he felt their inadequacy. Facts alone could not convey the quiet moments, the shared silences, the trust built over months. A segmented arthropoid delegate pulsed crimson, a sign of alarm. Discovery does not negate risk. Hybrid entities have historically destabilized power balances. Lyris reacted then. She lifted her head and stepped forward one pace, stopping at the edge of her field. Her tails spread slightly, not in aggression, but assertion. She typed slowly and deliberately. I am not a vessel. I am a person. This child is not a weapon. The chamber stilled. Even through mute protocol, the impact was unmistakable. Elias felt pride surge unexpectedly. Not because she defended their child, but because she claimed herself. The medical council overlay activated, projecting layered scans of the developing hybrid. Neural activity spiked visibly, patterns forming in complex lattices, neither fully human nor varin. A murmur rippled through the delegates. The avian Kesh representative signaled again. Cognitive development exceeds projected timelines. Environmental stimuli appear to influence growth. Elias knew what that meant. The child was learning, adapting, responding. Already aware in ways that defied precedent. A human ethics officer raised a virtual hand. We must consider parental rights. Separation at this stage could constitute psychological harm to both parent and offspring. That word, parent, landed heavily in Elias' chest. He had not said it aloud. No one had. Yet there it was, undeniable. Lyris's ears flicked toward him briefly, a subtle acknowledgement. Her fur warmed faintly, a whisper of gold beneath the silver. Then the council did what councils always did. They deferred. Risk assessment committees formed, oversight panels proposed, temporary measures enacted. The pregnancy would continue under observation. Movement would be restricted. Contact would be regulated. Elias read the final resolution with clenched jaw. Together but apart. Allowed proximity but never privacy. As the chamber dissolved and delegates disconnected, the containment fields dimmed. Lyris was escorted not by guards, but by watchers. Elias followed at a sanctioned distance, every step measured, every glance recorded. They were led to adjacent quarters, mirror images divided by reinforced transparency. Not a prison. Not freedom. Inside his room, Elias stood still, hands shaking now that no one demanded composure. Across the divide, Lyris sat slowly on the edge of her resting platform, one hand braced, the other instinctively protecting her abdomen. The mute field here was lighter, allowing text exchange without delay. She typed first. They will watch everything. He answered. Then we give them nothing but truth. She smiled faintly, then winced, a flash of discomfort crossing her features. Elias was at the barrier in an instant, palm pressed flat, heart racing. "Are you hurting?" he typed. She shook her head, breathing carefully. "No." The child reacted to the council's stimuli. Too many minds focused at once. Guilt surged through him. "I am sorry." Her eyes softened. "Do not be. Awareness is not pain." They stood there for a long moment, hands mirrored, breath slowly aligning despite the barrier. Elias felt something then, subtle but undeniable. A resonance. Not sound, not touch. Recognition. His wrist pad pulsed, registering a low-level neural sync. Impossible under mute conditions. Yet the data was there. Lyris noticed his expression and typed, "You feel it too." He nodded, unable to find words even in text. The child was listening. Not with ears, not with language, but with connection. Outside their quarters, analysts would later argue over data points and anomalies. But inside the silence, something simpler was happening. A family was forming.